What's up guys, I'm Michael Essa. We're out here at the FCP Euro Proving Grounds at Lime Rock Park, and we've got a bunch of E36s behind me. We're gonna kind of talk about them and how they're one of the best, least expensive ways to get into drifting. So a few years ago, you used to see tons of S chassis. Every time you went to a drift event, 90% of the cars were S chassis. And now you're seeing a lot more BMWs. E36s and E46s are gaining popularity. They're actually very inexpensive. They work really well. There's tons of different engine packages that you can drop in them. The limited slip diffs that come from the factory, you've got different ratios for the rear end. You've got tons of different angle kits that you can put on the cars, body kits. You can really customize the car, and they are really solid right out of the box. All these cars behind me are E36s, but they're all different models and they all have different engines in them. This car actually behind me is my car. It's a 95 M3 that has an S50 in it. Makes about 220, 240 horsepower, somewhere in that range. We've got this car. This is a 328. It has an M52 that makes probably 180, 190 horsepower. So it's not necessary to have a ton of power. If you get the setup on the car right, you actually learn a lot more about car control and how to drift with the lower horsepower car. And that also helps with tire wear. You can do tons of laps and not have to just come in every lap, 2 laps, 3 laps and change tires. You can go for an hour on a set of tires, non-stop. So one of the cars, the TI, actually has an S54 swap in it. So that's a 330 horsepower engine that you can basically just drop into that chassis. It bolts up to the transmission. It's so easy to do, it works so well. So if you want an upgrade in power, that's drop-in, the S54 is the way to go. That's the engine that I run in my pro drift car. Mine's obviously turbo and it makes over 1,000 horsepower, but NA, they're really reliable as well. So there's a lot of engine packages that you can put in these cars, obviously, and I'm just talking about the bolt-in BMW ones, and you know, other people put all kinds of engines in them. But there's so many options that you can do there. There's also tons of options for steering angle kits, suspension parts. My car is very basic. I've actually just got E46 lower control arms on it. They're a little bit longer than the E36, so it widens the front track a bit. And other than that, I've got tie rod spacers, and that's it. It's all stock. You don't need a ton of angle. The cars already have pretty decent angle from the factory. And with a low horsepower car, you don't want a lot of angle anyway. If you have too much angle, you're just gonna end up scrubbing too much speed. So keeping you know, about 50 degrees of steering angle is not an issue at all. Actually makes the car drive really well. And it's very, very inexpensive. And then the red car behind me also has E46 arms. Same thing, works really well. Super cheap and easy to do. But there's so many things that you can just buy off the shelf and bolt on. The rear suspension is very simple. It's a trailing arm, a couple bushings there, and a lower camber link, and you're basically ready to go right out of the box. You don't need to change all these links. It's not a multi-link setup, so they're very strong. You can drop them off curbs. You'll probably bend a wheel before you bend any of the suspension parts. So I've drifted E36s from like completely stock without any modifications made to them. Stock shocks and rubber bushings, and they move around a lot, but you can get them sideways and you can have a lot of fun with them. One of the first upgrades that you would do to make the car better is a set of coilovers. So bolt on a set of coilovers. Mine's an M3, so it has a clutch type limited slip in it. We just pulled that apart and rebuilt it, put it back in. It works great. Another way to do it is to take a factory diff, like that would be in a 328, weld it up, and now you have basically a spool, so you have a locked diff the whole time. It's really predictable. It's not a lot of fun to drive on the street. If you still drive your car on the street, I would go with the clutch type. But either way, you've got a lot of options, and you even have different gear ratio options that came in different cars. So the M3 behind me, the 95 M3, came with a 315 ratio ring and pinion, and we put a 391 in it to really just wake it up. It doesn't have a ton of power, so you kind of want to change the gearing and bring it up, and that'll help you keep the car sideways. So there's a lot of different ways to set a car up. It doesn't matter if it's an E36 or an E46 or really any chassis. camber setup in the rear is going to be important to get the most out of your tire. You'll see a road race car might have 2 to 3 degrees of negative camber in the front and maybe 2 to 3 degrees of negative camber in the rear, but that's all dependent on the tire. Same thing with drifting. So if you're running a really low profile tire with a lot of pressure and you have a really stiff suspension, you're not going to have a lot of wheel movement, you're not going to have a lot of camber change, so you're going to want to run the wheels pretty straight up and down. And you can adjust that basically by looking at your tire wear and making a small camber change and just kind of dialing that in. It also is dependent on the track you're running on. If you're running on a track with a lot of right-handers, you're going to have a staggered camber setup. You might have positive on one side and negative on the other to get the camber wear even across and be able to use all of that tire. And in the front end, you're going to want anywhere from 2.5 to 5 degrees of camber. It really depends on the angle kit that you're running. With the E36 lower control arm, you get about 2.5 to 3 degrees of camber, depending on if you have coilovers. If you have coilovers, you can obviously adjust the camber on top. So there's a lot of different ways that you can set up the car and dial it into your liking. All right, so another thing that a lot of people overlook is just the general maintenance on a drift car, especially if you got an older car like an E36 or E46. Most of the bushings are shot. Cooling system, if it hasn't been gone through already, that is like #1 on the list. You're gonna be out there thrashing the car. You're gonna be going sideways, which means that you're not gonna be getting airflow through the front of the car, through the radiator. You're just gonna be relying on that fan. So it's really important to make sure your clutch fan is working properly. Also, see a lot of people put electric fans and take the clutch fan off. I think the best thing you can do is leave the clutch fan on it. It'll draw more air than any electric fan that you can buy. It's just really easy and reliable. So that's something that you want to just, make sure your shroud's in good condition, make sure your clutch fan, the blades and the clutch itself are working properly, and you shouldn't have any overheating problems. Going into the rest of the cooling system, make sure your radiator's good, expansion tank, all your hoses, and that's gonna just allow you to just drive the car and not get to the track and have an issue, try to drive the car home, call AAA, whatever you have to do. You don't want to do that. You want to be able to get out to the track and just have some fun. Something else that is often overlooked is the clutch on a drift car, especially on a low power drift car. You're going to do a lot of clutch kicks to keep the car sideways. So having a good clutch in there is important. And I'm telling you this, but I have a stock clutch in my car. It's really hard to drive. It still works, but if you have a solid, like a 6-puck or whatever kind of clutch in there, it's going to work much better. A lighter weight flywheel, the engine's gonna be able to rev faster in between shifts and between a handbrake pull and back on throttle. You're gonna have a lot better response. The car's gonna be a lot more fun to drive. So another good thing to think about is the driver's seat. All right, you're sitting in a stock seat, going around a corner, throwing a car sideways, doing transitions. If you're flopping around in the car and you don't have any way to hold yourself down, it's gonna be really hard to feel what the car is doing underneath you. You're going to struggle quite a bit. So something that you could look into is getting like a Sparco seat, bolting it in there. And if you daily drive your car, they're pretty easy to unbolt, take out, and put the stock seat back in. Some harnesses help a ton. A roll bar is really nice to have to be able to strap the harnesses in properly and also add some safety to the car. It's not often that we see drift cars roll over, but it's a possibility. And then obviously when you get better and you start tandeming, then there are going to be requirements for a roll cage, sometimes a fire system, all these little things that are just going to keep you safe. And in the event of a crash, you're going to be okay. You're going to get out of the car. The car's damaged, you're all right. Not that bad of a day. All right, so after telling you guys about all these differences and all the things that you can do to an E36, go out there, find an E36. You can probably buy one for 1,500 bucks. Do the cooling system stuff, throw a clutch in it, throw some coilovers on it. Steering angle kit if you want to, or just some E46 lower control arms. Get the diff, upgrade the ring and pinion, and you could probably be all in for less than 7,500 bucks and have an awesome drift car that's just gonna run all day long and you're gonna get a ton of seat time in it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and maybe learned something about all the different types of E36s and engine packages that you can put in them. Stay tuned for more drift content. We're gonna keep bringing it to you.